The Real Tony Soprano, Part 2. Knowledge, mansions, bathrobes, meat, and Paul Castellano. Today I'd like to continue in my Real Tony Soprano series. In this episode, I'd like to delve into the various similarities and references between Tony's character and the infamous mobster Big Paul Castellano. Big Paul came up in Brooklyn in the old days as the cousin of legendary mafia don Carlo Gambino. Carlo schooled him over the years to be a mob boss, and Paul dutifully did what he was asked, all the while running a loan sharking business, getting his hands into the unions and construction rackets, and even starting a meat distribution business, as well as owning several butcher shops. As a note, Terrence Winter, one of the main writers for The Sopranos, used to work in Big Paul Castellano's butcher shop as a kid. This helps to lend credence to Castellano being a basis for Tony. With Carlo on his deathbed, he named Big Paul his successor. Riches began to pour in from tributes paid up the ladder by the various mafia crews in the Gambino family, as well as large-scale business interests that he already had. Big Paul moved from his modest home in Brooklyn to a large house he had built in the Toad Hill section of Staten Island. The garish mansion was big, white, and had columns in the front. It was a doppelganger of the White House, and that's what his underlings referred to it as. This is obviously referenced with Tony's own suburban mansion set back on a hill, a house which was custom built by Carmela's father, Hugh.
You know, your father did this house, and it was more than decent workmanship.
Most days, Paul Castellano would stalk his mansion in his bathrobe and slippers, receiving mob visitors for various meetings. Captains and soldiers would make pilgrimages to the boss's home to drop off envelopes of money and news from the rackets. Sounding like someone we know? Castellano had a wife named Nina and adult children, as well as a budding relationship with his maid Gloria. Again, Tony has a maid Liliana, although he does not have a sexual relationship with her. He was a philanderer, often poorly concealing his indiscretions from his wife. FBI agents who visited the mansion recalled seeing Paul Castellano's kitchen filled with the choicest cuts of meat, freebies, I'm sure, from his various interests in the meat business. Furthermore, Paul even consulted with chicken magnate Frank Perdue about getting his birds into New York area supermarkets. Obviously, this is a parallel to Tony and his pork store, as well as the many references to meat in the show and its connections to Tony's mafia business and overall life.
All this from a slice of gabagool.
Big Paul, being older and in ill health, suffering from diabetes, had some side effects related to his disease. One of those was impotence. It was stopping him from consummating his relationship with his mistress and maid, Gloria. Being a man of means, he of course wanted to solve this, so he scheduled an appointment for a penile implant. Now, this little tidbit relates to Tony in two ways. Firstly, this is for sure where they got the idea of the character Dr. Ira Fried, the urologist ever present at Tony's backroom card games.
Penile implants.
Hey, Doc.
Please, I've heard all the jokes. That's right.
One of the services he provides is penile implants. We discover this when Tony sees one of his commercials while watching TV, to which he says,
Be it Viagra, penile enhancement surgery,
Imagine, in an operation like that.
Injection. I can help you increase the length, girth, and vitality of what occurred naturally.
This also mirrors Tony's own struggle with impotence, which are well documented and discussed with Dr. Melfi.
Can always tie it. I'm having a,
reaction?
A side effect.
Some people experience a diminished libido. They have a hard time getting or maintaining
Bingo.
Another connection here references the way in which penile implants are engineered. It is essentially the same as a gooseneck lamp. It's malleable, able to be bent into any position one desires, and then stored away for later. Big Paul, being at the top of the Gambino family, was a target for FBI surveillance and of course an investigation to knock him off his perch. The FBI, after extensive research, determined that Big Paul would talk business with his underlings in a dining room area off the kitchen. They also determined that a gooseneck lamp was close enough to the table to be a viable place for a bug. While Big Paul was away for his penis implant, the FBI broke in, placed a bug inside the aforementioned lamp. We of course know that in The Sopranos, the FBI did a very similar thing, breaking into Tony's house and placing a bug in a gooseneck lamp in the basement, where Tony often discussed business. I would also like to note that I will be revisiting this in a separate episode as it conflates two pieces of mafia history. Anyway, the FBI were only able to get a few conversations before Meadow takes the lamp to school, neutralizing the bug. Conversely, the bug in Big Paul Castellano's house was much more profitable, producing a clutch of incriminating evidence. What The Wire also discovered was the depths of who Big Paul really was. Many times, The Wire picked up on a man who was burdened by power and it would seem had not really wanted to become the boss of the family, or at least felt an obligation to do so. He complained of his inferiors lacking patience and smarts and only respected a small few who were low-key. The boss was even recorded saying, "I wish I was more educated. I wish I knew more." This, of course, mirrors Tony's own struggle with his life as a mafia boss and what it all means, as well as his attempts to reach for something larger. His desire, ham-handed of course, to be a learned man, a wise man, accepted in polite society.
A blue chip portfolio like your cousin's suggesting to keep pace with inflation? If it makes your wife happy, go with God.
Buy land, AJ, because God ain't making any more of it. Hey, this is advice I'm imparting to you as your father.
Both Tony and Paul tried to surround themselves with who they thought were learned men, captains of industry. I'm certain Big Paul is where they get that aspect of Tony's personality. Much of the information about the investigation into Paul and his personal life was revealed in a book written by two FBI agents named Joseph O'Brien and Andy Kearns.
Tell that to Paul Castellano.
In the end, Big Paul was murdered outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan by a young upstart named John Gotti.
Paulie Castellano's spectacular execution was a grisly piece of street theater that has left authorities with dozens of unanswered questions and apparently few leads. Federal agents and police believe that the three hitmen capped off their seamless contract with a slick getaway in a waiting car.
Him and Gotti were caught in a death grip, and Paul's wealthy and reclusive lifestyle had begun to chafe on the rank-and-file mobsters. As for what happened to Tony, well, the debate rages on. But I can say for certain Big Paul Castellano was a major inspiration for Tony, and for sure one of the real-life Tony Sopranos, if you will.